we are in the throes of an enormous change that is taking place in the global economy. Wherever I go, whether it is in the United States or Europe or in India or China or wherever we go, we see that things are changing so fast. We really do not know where we are heading. It's not only the economy, it is the society, it is the political framework that is really undergoing change. I'm sure Nitin will address himself to this and will engage others in that. Thank you very much, Nitin. Thank you very much, all of you, for coming. Thank you.
I've been asked to talk a little bit about the future of leadership, and let me try and make that argument by focusing on 4 themes that I think are really important to the future of leadership. The first theme, I would say, is that the 20th century in business, and in fact the 20th century probably in terms of the imagination of the whole world, was very much, whether we like it or not, the American century. It was a century that was dominated by America in almost every sphere of activity, whether it be economics, whether it be politics, whether it be culture. So the 20th century was very much the American century. I think the 21st century is unambiguously going to be a global century. One thing that leaders will have to learn how to operate in is a world in which they can't orient themselves simply in competition towards one dominant player. They'll actually have to constantly be watchful for dominance shifting on an ongoing basis as we engage in a world of global competition. The second major challenge that I think the future of leadership will present is that if you look at each generation of humanity has to confront major problems that collectively impact humanity. The major problems that affect humanity today are challenges like the environment, challenges like healthcare, challenges like poverty, the inequity that is great around the world. And these are very, very significant challenges that the world faces, challenges of global security and peace. So I think this is going to be a second major challenge that the future leaders will have to confront. A third major challenge that future leaders will have to confront is that I think the world is poised for a remarkable period of innovation. I know that in the midst of what seems to be an economic crisis, we are very worried about just how do we get out of this crisis. I can assure you that at some point we will. And the way we will, and the challenge that will lie ahead, is a period of amazing innovation. The fourth challenge is a challenge that I think is, to my mind, the most deeply troubling. I am very distressed, certainly in America, but I have seen this data all across the world, that we live in a moment in which business leadership has lost a lot of trust in society. So business has to always be an other-oriented profession. It can't be a self-oriented profession. And I think this shift in terms of recognizing that the real role of business leaders is not just to be in it for themselves, but to be in it for the benefit of society, is a vital transformation that is necessary in the culture of business if the future of leadership is going to be brighter than it has been the last several years.
Thanks so much for being here. I think some of the things that Dr. Nohria said certainly lay the foundation of what we're going to discuss. And if leaders in India have to look at being, in this century, global leaders leading global corporations and get ready for the competitive access and the shift of that access, then perhaps one big question we all need to ask ourselves and everyone here is it time for leadership to be looked at as something collective and not about individuals? And that's what I'm going to take and begin this conversation and discussion. Dr. Nohria, is that really the first tenet of leadership in the new century?
So I think if you imagine a world that is becoming more global, more complex in terms of operating across different institutional spheres, more focused on innovation, it's going to be very hard unless you have an extraordinary degree of hubris to believe that as a single leader, you can possibly understand everything that's going on in a global world across all sectors with innovation taking place every day. So I really do believe that the image of the great leader who was a solitary person who out of their own individual force of personality and will is probably a model of leadership that was better suited to the 20th century and is less likely to be suited to the 21st century. And a model of leadership which is much more collective, exactly as you say, in which leaders learn how to harness the capabilities of other leaders. In fact, a distributed model of leadership is really going to be the model of leadership that will be much more useful in the future.
Lakshmi?
Yeah, I think the point that you made is very valid. It's more about the style of leadership or the future of leadership, from going away from the control or the competitive type of leadership to more collaborative and creative type of leadership. If you look at many of the leaders who are considered icons today, are very, very creative, and they collaborate. Because, what we always notice, particularly in the technology sphere, is we don't know what the future workplace is going to look like. It is constantly changing. Just before coming, I was just talking about it. People are distributed. The experience that they have at home to the experience that they have in the office is very, very different. The new millennial generation is trying to merge the two together. It's a 24/7 world. Everyone is tethered to devices. They're far more efficient, far more productive. There are new innovation that's happening every day. And the people who are respected in any context are those who are creative or innovative, coming up with ideas, not the people who sit on a pedestal or somewhere and preaching. That's gone. Values, terrific. It's imbibed. Everybody knows about that. The people who are respected are those who come up with new ideas and who innovate. They may not even be recognized within the organization. They're somewhere. Yeah. They're not very visible, like the 20th century leaders.
Isn't this debate also a lot more relevant because we're going from being a value economy to a more value-added economy? And in that sense, you, Chanda, for example, run such a huge bank. You want to make sure that everybody at every level understands this philosophy of being able to have open discussions, share ideas, and therefore create future leaders.
We are such a young country, and while we know that 45% of our population is in the working age group, that's between 25 to 65, but within that, almost 75% of the population is between 25 and 45 years of age. That means you have to create leaders at a much younger stage. So people are really spending a few years learning about the job and then having to become leaders. And therefore, it's no longer about saying, having spent 30 years in a job and creating a domain experience, I'm now leading a team. I'm actually trying to kind of learn while my team members are learning. And therefore, it's important for the leader to harness the talent, allow ideas to grow, and then make the entire team even more effective.
So there's always this criticism, and I'm not sure it's only about India, but the sense that existing leaders tend to capture, upcoming leadership because, one, they don't want them to get away from the good work they're doing because they seem to be getting the numbers, day after day. But yet, everybody wants to sort of keep that captured because the one on top doesn't move ahead and doesn't sort of open way for the rest. Do you think that's a culture that really needs change? Because we're developing, we've got lessons to learn, and we can do that earlier.
I don't know whether there is any specific pattern that you can see, but fundamentally the way I look at it is there are 2-3 styles of leadership. We are very much used to a command and control driven. Okay, and then you called it collective leadership. Even the collective leadership doesn't go very far. It's still a bunch of people, maybe 10, 15 people trying to come to a consensus. Mm-hmm. That is definitely better than a totally command and control driven leadership. But what I would like to call is a behavior driven leadership. See, if you can take time to really understand what the path that you want to follow and not worry about the metrics, about the destination, and if you can communicate that very effectively across the company, if you can ensure that everyone understands that path and the behaviors that needed to be exhibited, I think you will generate leaders much, much faster.
But I think somewhere there, do we have to start looking at it from within the employees? First look inside the organization before we look outside to make contributions to the larger society?
So I've studied human motivation, and it's amazing that if you do surveys of what actually motivates employees, employees are most motivated when they feel that what their company is doing is actually creating real value for their customers. So if you think about an employee and you say, what made you happiest today? It may, for those of us who are managers, we may not believe it, but actually what makes them proudest of their day is if they had an encounter